The rogues gallery of Yu-Gi-Oh! Is definitely an interesting one. Yu-Gi-Oh! Villains tend to run the gambit from bombastic and entertaining, to maniacal and disturbing, to horrendously boring and one-dimensional, but every so often Yu-Gi-Oh! Has a villain that just really knocks it out of the park. One that's just the right combination of captivating, twisted, and tragic, and for me, few, if any, of Yu-Gi-Oh!'s many villains hits that sweet spot quite as well as the primary antagonist of Season 3 of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX, Yubel. Voiced in the English dub by Cassandra Lee Morris, and by a combination of Hisao Egawa and Hiromi Tsuru in the Japanese version, Yubel is a dual monster spirit who serves as the big bad for Yu-Gi-Oh! GX Season 3, you know, the one that decided that Jaden Yuki's life just really needed to take a hard left turn into soul-crushing sadness and life-altering trauma. Of course, most of that trauma is thanks to Yubel herself, who enacts multiple plans to inflict pain and suffering on Jaden Yuki, not to mention basically everyone around him. But the thing that makes Yubel so compelling as a character, and as a villain, is why they chose to spend the whole season making Jaden's life a living hell. And believe it or not, it was out of love. Don't get me wrong here, it was an incredibly fucked up and disturbed kind of love, but trust me, we'll get to that. But since I've been suffering another bout of Yu-Gi-Oh! GX brain rot, in part because of the recent announcement of some awesome brand new Yubel support in the actual card game. Seriously though, can we take a second to talk about how the new fusion card is basically Yubel changing their appearance so they more closely resemble Flame Wingman, because she'd obviously know that's one of Jaden's favorite cards? God, my fucking heart, dude! I thought I'd take a look at Yubel's character arc, and just what makes him one of the most compelling, multifaceted, and ultimately really tragic villains in the entire Yu-Gi-Oh! Franchise. And as always, if you haven't watched Yu-Gi-Oh! GX yet, or at least haven't watched Season 3, big time heckin' spoilers ahead! So before we get into the gory details, I think it's important to establish who Yubel is first. Yubel, as they currently exist, is a dual spirit, but they actually started their incredibly long life as a regular human boy living in an unnamed kingdom in the ancient past. The ruler of this kingdom informed Yubel that his son, the prince, would one day become the supreme king and control a power known as the Gentle Darkness, a force of the cosmos that nurtures life and is the equal and opposite force to the malevolent light of destruction. Knowing that the prince needed someone to guard and protect him until he could mature and learn to control this power, Yubel offered themselves, undergoing an invasive and, given the time period, likely incredibly painful procedure to transform themselves into something that could keep the prince safe, with a body that the king described as far too ugly to glance at. Which, considering how cool Yubel's visual design actually is, I'd have to say just confirms the king has no taste, but that's neither here nor there. After that procedure, Yubel became something that transcended both humanity and its understanding of gender, with a body that not only bears a lot of aspects attributed to common depictions of demons and dragons, but also has a pretty even split of human physiological aspects of both masculine and feminine coded anatomy, which means that Yubel is most certainly, at the very least, non-binary, if not more specifically something along the lines of bigender or intersex, and thus is really the first overt queer representation in Yu-Gi-Oh! And also, if I'm being perfectly honest about it, they may have had some pretty significant influence on me eventually figuring out that I was non-binary myself. Also, while we're on the subject, I know I've been kinda loosey-goosey with the pronouns that I've been using to refer to Yubel, and spoilers, that is going to keep happening, but that's really because of not only their visual gender presentation, not to mention their habit of constantly fluctuating between male and female VAs, at least in the Japanese version. but also because of the ways that not only other characters refer to her, but also how Yubel refers to himself, often using boku, a Japanese first-person pronoun that's basically a masculine equivalent to I in English. So personally, I've always just kind of rolled with the headcanon that Yubel just uses whatever pronouns he wants and what she's feeling in that particular moment because, you know, ultimately they just kind of laugh in the face of our antiquated concept of gender. Anyway, with all of that established, fast forward to the modern age, and Yubel's Duel Monsters card came into the possession of Jaden Yuki, the reincarnation of the Supreme King, who Yubel felt compelled to protect and try to keep safe from anyone they viewed as a threat. Which, of course, included those that beat Jaden in duels and unintentionally made him cry. Yubel's nasty habit of cursing everyone that Jaden dueled and setting them into comas made it so no one even wanted to play with him, leading to what must have been an incredibly lonely existence. It got so bad to the point where Jaden thought the best possible solution was to send Yubel into space in a Kaiba Corp satellite, one that was separate from the one containing his contest-winning Neo-Spacian card designs, in the hopes that maybe some sort of cosmic energy up there would fix whatever was wrong with Yubel. However, while the Neo-Spacians got a nice dose of the gentle darkness, Yubel's satellite came into contact with the light of destruction, the same malevolent force that possessed Sartorius in Season 2. And while the light didn't take control of Yubel like it had with Sartorius, it still had a profoundly adverse effect on Yubel, putting them through years of physical and psychological agony, which likely only compounded the heartache of being separated from Jaden for so long. Yubel tried desperately to reach out to Jaden, even giving him visions in his dreams, but obviously there was nothing Jaden could do. The nightmares got so bad that his parents' only apparent solution was to put their child through some sort of intense medical procedure that erased Jaden's memories of Yubel, severing their connection entirely. So while Jaden would get a bit older and begin his education at Duel Academy and make a ton of new friends, Yubel endured years of agonizing pain and suffering, isolated and alone and afraid, with no way to contact her closest companion, not even understanding why this was happening to her. Until one day, something in Yubel just cracked. If this is how Jaden treated Yubel despite Yubel's endless love for him, then this must be how Jaden showed his love for Yubel. Why else would Jaden let them suffer alone for all those years, despite everything Yubel did to protect him? Why else would the person she dedicated her entire existence to whom they swore that they would always protect, allow them to experience so much pain? It had to be his way of expressing his love. It just had to be. And Yubel was oh so grateful for that expression of love from Jaden. And he would gladly reciprocate all of that love someday, even if it was the last thing they ever did.
Man, I wish I had ghost powers too. Your heart's desire is my command.
Of course, Yubel couldn't show his love for Jaden as soon as he'd hoped, not only because of Jaden's parents putting him through that medical procedure that severed their connection, but also because the process of re-entering Earth's atmosphere left a little to be desired. By which I mean, when Professor Thelonious Viper stumbled across the wreckage of Yubel's satellite, all that was left was a single arm, so, you know, Yubel was gonna need someone to give them a hand. Get it? Get it? Because it's like, you know, Yubel was only down to one hand, and it's like, you know, give me a hand, like, you know, when you need.
Good one, Jay! A joke's not funny when you have to explain it.
Even in their current state, Yubel's form gave them some pretty unique abilities, one of which was to see inside the darkness of a person's heart. And Yubel would use that darkness to convince several characters to aid him in his schemes at various points, all with the ultimate goal of reuniting with Jaden Yuki and showing him just how much Yubel loved him. The first of these was the aforementioned Thelonious Viper, to whom Yubel promised that they could revive Viper's dead son Pierce if he would use his bioband system to drain the life force of Duel Academy students to help restore Yubel's actual body, but there was also Marcel Bonaparte, a raw yellow student, and son of, at one point, the Duel Academy Vice-Chancellor, Jean-Louis Bonaparte, who Yubel flat out possessed at one point with the promise of taking away Marcel's loneliness, which apparently also involved magically erasing his French accent.
I ordered it to go. I thought you Americans like to eat fast food. I can still give you the power you desire. All I require is that you follow my every command.
And then, of course, there was the alliance he made with local self-centered scumbag Adrian Gecko, convincing him not to shut down the bioban system, and insisting that Adrian continue to help with Yubel's restoration, promising Adrian the power, prestige, and admiration that he so desperately craved. Of course, Yubel had little to no intention of actually granting any of these desires, and had no qualms about tossing aside those she aligned herself with, even going so far as to kill them in 2 of those occasions, as soon as they had outlived their usefulness to her. After all, they were merely pawns in her game. They didn't matter in the end. Nobody did. Nobody, that is, except for Jaden. Every single plan that Yubel enacted, dragging Duel Academy to an alternate dimension, turning most of Duel Academy into dual ghouls, possessing Marcel, manipulating Adrian, everything revolved around the singular goal of creating a world in which she and Jaden could be together forever, wherein they could show him all of the love that he had shown them for all of those many years. However, even when she had her real body back, she had control of all 3 Sacred Beast cards, and she had Jaden right in the palm of her hands, she didn't quite account for being outdone by Jaden's new best friend.
That's strange. Have we met before? I don't know, but it sure feels like it.
Let's take a second to talk about someone who is not only incredibly important to Jaden Yuki, but also, if you really think about it, to Yubel as well, the one and only Jesse Anderson. As one of the new transfer students to join Duel Academy in Season 3, Jesse Anderson made an immediate impact on the show, what with his sweet blue hair, his cool southern accent, and above all else, his awesome Crystal Beast cards. Jesse and Jaden made an immediate connection, with both of them being kinda goofy but ultimately kind-hearted dudes who absolutely lived for the game of Duel Monsters and can even communicate with Duel Spirits, considering them to be good friends, or in Jesse's case, even his family. Of course, these glaring similarities between the two, not to mention Jaden's utter joy at seeing Jesse shoehorn himself into their duel, weren't lost on Yubel, and Jesse was probably the second biggest target of Yubel's various schemes outside of Jaden himself, despite Jaden having only known Jesse for a cup of coffee in the grand scheme of things, especially compared to other characters like Cyrus and Hasselberry, who he's known for much longer. But believe it or not, it's not merely as simple as the fact that Jesse and Jaden had become so close so quickly that made Jesse the greatest obstacle to Yubel's love. Obviously that was a factor, but it really goes so much deeper than that. You see, for as much as Jesse could be seen as a mirror image of many aspects of Jaden, he could just as easily be read as something similar for Yubel. First off, Jesse and Yubel are not only 2 characters who are both largely defined by the concept of love in some form or another, but both are also thematically connected to some form of light. Yubel was of course corrupted by the light of destruction while in space, whereas Jesse's signature archetype, the Crystal Beasts, are all associated with colors that make up a rainbow, which forms in the sky when light rays refract off of raindrops. This obviously makes them both thematic reflections of Jaden, given his being the reincarnation of the Supreme King, he who controls the gentle darkness. But even beyond the thematic parallels, there's also a great deal of similarity between the two in terms of personality and actions. Jesse is driven, to a degree, by obsession, that being to find the legendary Rainbow Dragon to complete his Crystal Beast deck, as well as a fierce loyalty to those he cares about, even going so far as to sacrifice himself for their sake, which obviously includes the multiple instances throughout the show that he gladly threw himself into the line of fire for Jaden. And all of these traits present in Jesse are also present in Yubel, albeit to a more twisted and far more intense degree. The loyalty to Jaden, the obsession that drives their actions, the willingness to make personal sacrifices to protect those they care for and achieve their dreams. Jesse and Yubel are actually so similar to each other, and also in their connections to Jaden, and it's those similarities that ultimately make Jesse the greatest threat to Yubel's love for him. After all, if Jaden can love Yubel, then he could just as easily love someone who resembles Yubel. And in the end, Yubel hates Jesse more than any of Jaden's other friends, because Jesse is a reflection of herself. So maybe that's why, in the midst of her plan to use the pain and suffering of Jaden's friends to drive him to become the Supreme King, Yubel once again resorted to full-on possession, taking Jesse Anderson's body as their own. After all, Jaden came to this new dimension for the sake of his best friend, right? You know, when Jesse mentioned in an earlier episode that he dreamed one day of being the bridge between mankind and dual spirits, I kinda doubt that this is what he had in mind.
僕は傷ついたよ。苦しいんだよ。痛かったよ。だから10代にも同じ思いを味わってもらっているんだ。それが愛し合うということなんじゃないかな。
So let's fast forward a bit through Season 3. Yubel has put Jaden through absolute hell, using the negative emotions of his dearest friends, who Jaden had to see die and be sent to the stars one by one, to fuel the creation of a super dangerous card called Super Polymerization. In the process, the dormant powers of the Supreme King awoke within Jaden's soul, and he became a tertiary antagonist for the season for a good few episodes. Which, you know, may or may not have included slaughtering countless innocent people. After going through so much pain, so much trauma, so much life-crushing realization of the things he'd done while under the Supreme King's influence, Jaden finally confronts Yubel, who's now in the driver's seat of the body of Jesse, the friend that Jaden did so much to try and save. And in order to defeat Yubel, Jaden has to risk destroying the very friend that he did all of this for. A concept that Yubel absolutely loves. And what's even more messed up here is that Yubel truly, genuinely believes that engaging in this twisted game where Jaden's best friend is at risk, where Yubel could potentially have Jesse sent to the stars even if they lose, Yubel truly, honestly believes that doing all of this is a heartfelt expression of love for Jaden. And I think that's what ultimately makes Yubel such a compelling villain. Just the fact that every cruel, messed up thing they ever did, not only to Jaden, but also to everyone close to him, in Yubel's mind, was a genuine show of love, because Yubel honestly believed in their heart of hearts that the pain they suffered in space for all those years was Jaden's expression of his love for them. Even down to the way this duel plays out lines up with that logic. Yubel loves seeing Jaden's anger and hearing his insults, and she actually enjoys taking damage to her life points from his attacks, because she truly believes it's just another way Jaden is showing his love, and that he'd be happy and delighted to know that his best friend Jesse, as well as his beloved crystal beasts, are suffering in the process. Like, okay, with Yu-Gi-Oh! Villains on the whole, they do tend to do some pretty screwed up stuff, but they mostly have some sort of understanding that what they're doing is, in fact, evil, even if some of them, like Maximilian Pegasus, did what they did for someone that they loved, or like GX Season 2's big bad, Sartorius, they were actually under the direct control of an outside force and actually tried to stifle that force's plans whenever they could. For Yubel, the way they made Jaden's life a living hell, the way that they made all of Jaden's friends experience so much agony, they wholeheartedly believe that that's just how people who love each other express that love. That they love through causing each other pain. That suffering is just as important as joy. And ultimately, Yubel sought to create a brand new world, one where only they and Jaden would be together. A whole new universe to fill with their love. And they would do that with the card that Jaden's love helped them create. Super Polymerization.
Why did you... You didn't have to... People always do crazy things. When they're in love.
You know, I think the final duel of Season 3 between Jaden and Yubel really encapsulates just how different each one's definition of love really is. See, while Yubel's deck is focused almost entirely on summoning his own Duel Monsters card, and then basically single-mindedly playing cards that revolve around sacrificing others to keep the Yubel card on the field long enough for it to evolve into its stronger forms, all the while hoping to use Super Polymerization, the card that Yubel had bamboozled out of Jaden's graveyard during their last duel at literally the last second, to fuse all 12 dimensions together to create a brand new world where only Yubel and Jaden would exist with their love. Jaden's deck is built on the bonds of friendship, both metaphorically, considering the cooperation between the elemental hero and Neo-Spacian archetypes that's on full display here, and as a literal mechanic, given Jaden's focus on fusions, with his fusion monsters coming in a wide variety of combinations and possibilities. It's Jaden's bonds and connections with his friends, and with his monsters, that prove that love isn't so narrow like Yubel thinks it is, and that real love is wide enough, large enough, and deep enough to envelop the entire universe. But Yubel literally can't process that notion, that Jaden could find love and companionship from so many other beings in his life, that he could feel love and give love out to people without hurting them. Because pain is what Yubel believed to be Jaden's expression of love for them, because that's what Yubel had to believe in order to cope with what otherwise must have felt like Jaden betraying them after all that they had done for him. Think about this from Yubel's point of view for a second. You give up your life, your soul, your very humanity in order to protect someone that you were close to, and they pledge to love you and only you. But then you wake up, probably thousands of years later, and the person you swore to protect and who swore to love you sends you away to experience years of seemingly endless pain like you've never even imagined. And then, when you reunite with them again, they don't even remember your name or what they made you suffer, even after all you did to protect them. I have a feeling that any of us would probably be more than a little messed up after all that. And yeah, those feelings were most likely exacerbated by the corrupting influence of the Light of Destruction, but at the same time, I can't help but feel like Yubel felt like their only option was to succumb to that corruption, to allow the light to twist their heart until their only conclusion was that Jaden did all of this out of love. After all, as they themselves even said, how else could they have survived all those years of pain, of heartbreak, if they didn't believe that they were being loved? In the end, in a move that surprises even Yubel, Jaden actually uses super polymerization himself, not to create another monster like he had done with Rainbow Neos in their last duel, or to create another world like Yubel wished to do, but to fuse his own spirit with that of Yubel, reuniting them forever. Now, I've heard a lot of viewpoints about this ending to their duel over the years, and about Jaden's decision here, and how it was a rash or even a stupid decision on Jaden's part to essentially cave to the demands of a horrible, manipulative person, but if you think about it, it's really not that simple at all. You do have to remember, again, that Yubel was corrupted by the Light of Destruction, and I promise, I'm not constantly bringing that point up just to completely absolve them of all the fucked up stuff they did, of course not, but I think it's important to remember that, because of that influence, Yubel was not in a sound, reasonable state of mind at all when he found Jaden again. And even if you want to point a finger at Yubel's habit of cursing people who beat Jaden at duel monsters, which was definitely pre-Light of Destruction, again, we have to look at it from Yubel's perspective. The whole reason they mutilated themselves and became this monster was to protect the Supreme King, who pledged to love Yubel forever and to never forget her, only for Yubel to wake up in the modern age with the person she swore to protect being a helpless little kid. Not to mention that he was dueling, which Yubel likely still viewed as a life-threatening thing to do, given how this franchise loves to hammer home the fact that Duel Monsters was involved in basically every major historical event ever, and was absolutely a life or death situation. It's no wonder she was so overbearing and overprotective. I mean, what else did she have to go on to prove otherwise? Every single thing Yubel had ever done in their long, long lifetime had absolutely been out of love for Jaden and his previous incarnation, the Supreme King. And it's that love that kept Yubel going for all those years, even as they had to bear the weight of the heartache and the agony of thinking that the person that they loved, the one that they did everything to protect, could just cast them aside and forget about them. And I think truly understanding all of that is what compelled Jaden to reunite his and Yubel's souls, because he likely not only felt quite a bit of responsibility for what had happened to Yubel, even if he was a little kid at the time and didn't really have any actual say in any of it, but also because he probably realized how Yubel doing everything they did was out of love for Jaden wasn't too unlike everything that he had done recently for the sake of Jesse. Not to mention, again, the whole wiping out entire villages as the Supreme King thing. The point is that they had both done some pretty messed up things for the sake of those they loved, and quite frankly, they both had quite a lot to answer for. And in Jaden's mind, it was probably better for both of them if they faced it together. Also, right before he does this, Jaden tells Cyrus that this wasn't some big self-sacrifice play, but rather his making the decision to grow up, which lines up so well with so many of the themes of the coming-of-age story that Yu-Gi-Oh! GX ultimately is. And his decision to reunite his soul with that of his long-lost friend, one could even say his soulmate, so that they could learn and mature and heal together, is probably one of the most mature decisions that Jaden Yuki ever made. And for Yubel's part, this move was so touching that they broke down into tears as they and Jaden embraced, pledging to fight the light together and whatever else may come, sincerely regretting the things that they had done, more than willing to go on this new journey with Jaden to make things right. That being said, I mean, one of the people Yubel destroyed in all this was Adrian Gecko, so, call me crazy, but I kind of feel like that evens things out a little bit. But now I want to hear from you. What do you think of Yubel as a character? Do you think they're redeemable? Let me know in the comments below. Give this video a like if you liked it, subscribe for more videos like this in the future, share this on your favorite social medias, and ring the bell so you'll always get notified when I upload. Thanks for watching. See you in the next video, friendos.